Okay, think about Mumbai. India's city of dreams, right? This huge, unified place, finance, culture. It just feels so solid, so ancient. But what if I told you it wasn't always like that? That it actually started as 7 separate islands. And get this, was once literally part of a wedding gift for a European princess. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really jumping into the fascinating history of Bombay, looking at how it went from that scattered group of islands to the single massive city we now call Mumbai.
Yeah, and the material we've looked through for this, it really lays out that whole transformation. We're talking centuries of change, different rulers leaving their mark, and these huge key developments that literally stitched the city together.
Yeah.
So our plan today is basically to unpack all of that, pull out the most important bits, the real aha moments, hopefully, so you can get a good, quick sense of this city's pretty amazing journey.
All right, let's dive in. So before Mumbai was Mumbai, what was it? The sources paint a picture of an archipelago, right? A group of 7 islands. Bombay Island, Colaba, Little Colaba, Mazgan, Parel, Worli, and Mahim, all separate.
And the earliest history, way back, points to the indigenous Koli and Agri tribes. They were living on these islands since the Stone Age, basically, long before, bigger powers showed up.
So picture it, not a city, just these scattered fishing villages, lots of marshland, mud flats connecting them at low tide maybe, caves, temples, hills, life very much tied to the sea. Fishermen, yes, but other communities too.
And what's really interesting from the accounts is that because they were separate, each island kind of had its own distinct culture, even their own local kings or chiefs. It was anything but unified.
Okay, so how does this collection of islands start getting, ruled by bigger players? There's this really long period from the 3rd century BCE all the way to 1348 CE. The sources say it was under various Hindu dynasties, started with the Mauryan Empire, King Ashoka, then others like the Satavahanas, the Rashtrakutas.
Right, a long stretch. Then comes a major change in 1348. The Delhi Sultanate moves in, takes control.
Yeah.
That's the end of that Hindu dynastic period. The Sultan, Naseruddin Mohammed bin Tughlaq, he appoints Jafar Khan as governor of Gujarat, and these islands become part of that.
But then another shift pretty fast. By 1398, the Tughlaqs are weaker. Jafar Khan spots his opportunity and, declares independence. He founds his own Gujarat Sultanate. And Bombay, or the islands, become part of his kingdom.
And this is really where things start to pivot towards European involvement, if you look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
This is the time when European powers are starting to make serious moves in the Indian Ocean, and that's going to totally change the game for these islands.
Yeah, the sources mention the Portuguese arriving in India around 1498, Vasco da Gama. They set up shop pretty quickly, Cochin in 1505, then captured Goa in 1510, which became, a major base for them. But getting Bombay took a bit longer. There's this early visit in 1508 by Francisco de Almeida, a Portuguese viceroy. He sails in, sees the harbor, and is apparently quite impressed. He's the one who supposedly names it Bombahia Good Bay. And that name, Bombay, kind of stuck.
Which does make you wonder, right? If you liked it in 1508, why didn't they take control until 1534? Well, the accounts explain there was this ongoing conflict with the ruler of the Gujarat Sultanate, King Bahadur Shah. The Portuguese there was the Battle of Mahim Creek in 1509. They captured the Mahim Fort maybe around 1528, 1529. It wasn't easy.
And Bahadur Shah himself was in a tough spot. He was under serious pressure from the Mughal Emperor Humayun, so this pressure kind of forces his hand, makes him look for allies, even the Portuguese he'd been fighting.
Exactly. And that leads straight to the Treaty of Bassein, December 1534. The sources detail it pretty clearly. Bahadur Shah basically gives Bombay and nearby Bassein to the Portuguese, and in return, he gets their help against Humayun. So that treaty marks the end of the Gujarat Sultanate's rule over the islands.
So the Portuguese finally have the 7 islands. What did they actually do with them for the next 100 years or so? The material suggests their focus was mostly agriculture and religion, promoting Christianity.
They did build some things, roads, some causeways to make getting between islands a bit easier, and forts. Bombay Castle started then, Badra Fort, Mahad Fort, some basic infrastructure.
And they were definitely pushing Christianity, building churches, even encouraged intermarriage, apparently trying to change the local society, which the sources call quite conservative.
Trade did happen, cotton, coconut fiber, spices, that sort of thing. But the impression from the sources is that there wasn't really massive development. It wasn't like Goa. Still relatively low-key compared to what came later.
Okay, now this is where it gets really dramatic, isn't it? The Portuguese had this grip on Indian Ocean trade, but it wasn't going to last forever. Other European powers wanted in.
Absolutely. The accounts mention a couple things happening. Spain attacking Portugal, weakened them back in Europe. And then English merchants start showing up in India from about 1583, which naturally leads to conflict with the Portuguese over who gets to trade where.
And there's a really key moment mentioned. The English East India Company, the EIC, arriving in Surat in 1612. They clash with the Portuguese right away at the Battle of Swali, and the EIC wins. The sources say this was a huge deal. Broke the Portuguese monopoly in that area, gave the English their first proper foothold.
And at the same time, you've got the Dutch becoming incredibly powerful in the region by the mid-1600s. The sources paint them as a major force, trading spices, silk, gold, getting very rich, and really challenging Portuguese dominance everywhere. A serious threat.
And this threat, especially from the Dutch, leads to probably the most unbelievable twist in Bombay's story. How it ended up British.
Exactly. The Portuguese are getting nervous, right? They see them getting stronger and stronger. So they started thinking maybe an alliance with the British could help. Maybe keep the Dutch out, or at least slow them down in India.
Which leads to this marriage proposal in 1661, a strategic marriage, really, between Britain's King Charles II and the Portuguese Princess Catherine of Braganza. The sources are clear this was much more about politics and alliance than romance. A treaty, basically.
And the dowry. I mean, the terms laid out in the material are just incredible. The 7 islands of Bombay, the port of Tangier in Morocco, trading rights for the British in Brazil and the Portuguese East Indies, freedom for English residents in Portugal, and about 2 million Portuguese crowns in cash.
Wow. The sources do say there was pushback in Portugal. Ministers, even the princess herself, weren't keen on giving away territory like Bombay. But that fear of the Dutch, their rising power, ultimately tipped the balance.
And here's a fascinating insight the sources offer. The Portuguese agreed partly because they just didn't see Bombay's potential. They didn't foresee its future the way the British maybe did. So the marriage happened, and the official transfer of Bombay to the English crown was finalized March 27, 1668.
So 1668, the British crown owns Bombay. But a king isn't going to run a distant port, so how does it become this engine of trade? Well, Charles II, on that same day, March 27, 1668, leases the islands to the East India Company, the EIC, for, well, basically nothing, £10 a year.
Just peanuts, really. And the EIC jumps right in. Their goal is clear: make this profitable. The sources detail them immediately starting work, building quays, warehouses, customs houses, fortifying Bombay Castle, setting up a court. George Oxenden, the EIC boss in Surat, becomes the first governor.
But they hit a snag early on. Health. The population was tiny, maybe 10,000 people, and apparently illness was rampant. Really hard to get work done when everyone's sick.
So the EIC did something quite smart, actually. They invested in building hospitals, improving medical facilities, and it worked. The sources show a huge population jump from that 10,000 up to maybe 60,000 between 1661 and 1675. Better health, plus the promise of work, drew people in.
And with more people came more trade. Things like salt, rice, ivory, cloth, lead, sword blades even. The port starts getting busy.
Security was also a major focus for the EIC. They built their own improved Bombay Castle by 1710. This gave them much better surveillance, helped protect shipping from pirates, and also from local powers like the Marathas who were active in the area.
Right. And as Bombay grew strategically, economically, and as the EIC kept having issues in Surat, which was still under Mughal influence, they made the big decision. By the mid-18th century, the EIC shifted its main headquarters from Surat to Bombay.
Yeah, that was a key moment. And then later, after the 1857 uprising, control shifted from the EIC to the British Crown, directly at the start of the British Raj period, though the EIC kept trading for a bit longer, until 1874.
But even with all this growth, there was still that fundamental problem. 7 islands, not one city.
Exactly. If you step back, this fragmentation was a huge headache. The sources talk about how difficult it was moving goods between islands, boats getting damaged or lost in floods during monsoons. It wasn't efficient.
Plus, they really needed that single, secure, deep water port totally under their control, unlike Surat. And just managing 7 separate administrative units must have been complicated.
So these problems lead Governor William Hornby around 1782 to propose something incredibly ambitious, a massive engineering project. The Hornby-Vellard reclamation. Vellard basically meaning a causeway across the water.
And the scale of this thing, it's hard to imagine. They literally started filling in the sea between the islands using rock, earth, rubble, basically anything they could find to build land bridges or causeways.
Yeah, and the sources stress this wasn't quick. It kicked off in 1782. and wasn't fully finished until 1845. That's what, over 60 years? 60 years of just physically connecting these islands.
An incredible feat of engineering for the time. And it worked. It joined the 7 islands into the single landmass that we recognize as the core of Mumbai today.
So the islands are joined. Now what? Well, the sources are pretty direct here. This new unified port city was developed by the British primarily for their economic gain. It became the main collection point for raw materials from all over India, cotton, spices, whatever England needed. Stored here, shipped out.
And the reverse was also true. Finished goods from factories in England came into Bombay and were then distributed across India. It was a crucial hub in both directions.
And to make all this happen, the factories, the docks, the transport, they needed workers, lots of them, and cheap. So the British actively encouraged migration from other parts of India to Bombay.
And the city just exploded, didn't it? It started to rival Kolkata, which had been the main center. Bombay quickly became the financial heart of the EIC and later British India.
Yeah, and the infrastructure kept pace, always focused on trade. More roads were built across the newly joined land. And crucially, railways started appearing in India from 1845. The sources point out their main initial purpose was getting goods to and from Bombay's port quickly.
It really shows Bombay's status that India's very first passenger train line also ran from here, starting in 1853, between Boribandar and Thane, catering to the growing population and the elite.
So after 1857, the mutiny, and the end of the EIC rule in 1874, Bombay is firmly under the British Raj, direct crown control.
And this period sees, well, more of the same in many ways. Continued development, prosperity for some, definitely rapid urbanization. People kept pouring in, seeking opportunities.
But that growth brought huge problems too. Overcrowding became intense, strain on sanitation, healthcare. The sources highlight the terrible plague epidemic in 1896 as a result of these conditions.
Yeah, that led to the creation of the Bombay City Improvement Trust. They tried to address some issues, built new settlements, but the sources also note a critical downside. These improvements often meant displacing existing Indian communities, workers, artisans, to free up land for projects the British wanted.
Another major project from this era, developing over a long time, was building seawalls, partly for protection, partly to reclaim more land. This eventually led to the construction of Marine Drive, which was actually finished during World War II around 1945. It even served a military purpose then for transport.
After the war, you see development pushing into the suburbs. Bombay is just solidifying its role as this major political and business center. And you see the grand architecture going up, the symbols of British power that are still there. Rajabai Clock Tower, Victoria Terminus now, CST, the High Court.
And the Gateway of India, probably the most famous symbol, built between 1911 and 1924, specifically for King George V's visit. A real statement of imperial presence.
Okay, let's jump forward. 1947, India gets independence. Bombay is a powerhouse city in the new nation. But the sources mention an interesting dynamic, the strong influence of the Gujarati community in business and the economy.
Right. And this apparently caused some friction with the region's majority Marathi-speaking population. They felt, somewhat marginalized in their own state's capital. This led to protests, even violence, between about 1956 and 1960. The Samyukta Maharashtra movement.
And the outcome of that struggle. The sources say the large Bombay state was actually partitioned in 1960. It was split into 2 new states along linguistic lines, Maharashtra, with Bombay as its capital, and Gujarat.
And then the final step in this long story, according to the material, came much later in 1995, when the city's name was officially changed from Bombay to Mumbai, reflecting its Marathi heritage.
So there it is. Quite a journey, isn't it? From 7 islands, ancient tribes, through Hindu dynasties, sultanates, the Portuguese, becoming a wedding gift, handed to the EIC, literally built into one piece by engineers over decades, shaped by British trade, empire, Indian independence movements, and finally, becoming the Mumbai we know.
It really is an incredible story when you lay it out. We've sort of traced those key moments straight from the sources, how trade, politics, war, alliances, even that marriage treaty, and massive engineering efforts all came together to create this unique place.
Well, hopefully this deep dive has given you some fresh perspective, maybe a few aha moments, about all the history packed under the surface of modern Mumbai.
And maybe something to think about. Given that Mumbai was literally constructed from separate pieces, populated by waves of different people under different rulers.
Yeah.
What does its very history tell us about how cities forge an identity, and how resilient can a place be when it's defined by constant change and adaptation?